Welcome, Julian. This is your time in the spotlight. I'm so grateful to have you featured in this interview this month. So welcome.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. Seen these on our media social posts, so it's great to be a part of that.
Yes, and now it's your time. So I'm going to just dive right in with my first question and ask, how did you get to the role that you're in today? Perhaps we can start with explaining a bit about what you do in your current role at Elantis and just what brought you here.
Great question. So currently in my current role, I function as an enterprise architect, which that role is actually a funny role. It's been around for decades, but nobody can really pinpoint what the role is. But the way I put it is it's vision, strategy, and it's closing opportunities, facilitating and helping customers. That's the long, short, and tall of it. Basically functioning as a guide, as a strategic guide, somebody who's in service of the delivery team, also in service of the sales team as well.
Great, thank you.
What brought me here, 20 years in consulting. I was very entrepreneurial by nature. So at a very young age, when I was very young and naive, I started an organization, a company called Ethics and New Technology. And I firmly believed I could bring principal ethics to business, to organizations. And we can see that now today in the green economy. I like to say I was maybe just a couple decades too early with my thoughts, and that's all good. But eventually I moved into, a consulting role and found that in order to stay abreast with current technologies, where future technologies are going, IT consulting is basically it. It's one of the toughest gigs going. And if you're going to excel there, you can basically excel anywhere in IT. And it became a passion, so to speak. So I worked as a web designer, a web developer, moved into the back end role, started dealing with the wonderful things that are the DBA role, a role that is highly disregarded, I would say, because it's a fantastic role. And then just through that experience of being able to work with a term that's called the full stack development, let's say, that really lent its hand to an easy transition into a solution architect role. And played the solution architect role for the better part of a decade, a very challenging role. It's arguably one of the most challenging roles there are, especially from a consulting perspective when you're functioning as an SA, multiple customers, multiple technology streams, etc. It just lent its hand, that experience just lent its hand to that role. And I really embraced and enjoyed that role tremendously. But I would like to eventually be a CTO. So the career path for me is basically how can I facilitate and enable organizations, ours as well as the ones that we work with, in order to embrace the art of the possible. And I feel that role can help enable and facilitate that. So sometimes I like to say I'm a CTO for hire when somebody says, hey, what does an EA do? And I just basically say, I'm a CTO for hire. You ask me a few questions and then I'll go away. I'll provide you some vision and strategy. And then ideally, we get to execute and implement those for them.
Amazing. So quite a journey you've had.
Yes, it has been. I've been blessed and very fortunate with teams that I've worked with, organizations that I've had the opportunity to collaborate with, some of the mentors that have come through my career. Worked with Fortune 1s, Fortune 500s. I've also worked with SMBs as well. Had an opportunity to work with non-for-profit organizations. I've really had a broad exposure to a number of what I'll say business verticals, just because that's what consulting is. And that's been really beneficial, but there's been people along the way that have had tremendous impact and kind of influence on my career as kind of times progressed. There's too many to mention and shout out, but the people that have helped and have guided me to this point, right? Because everything in my life has led to this point that we're sharing right now. And just kind of keeping that in perspective, I never thought I would be here, when you kind of go through and get into tech, when you get into IT, there's so many challenges in there, especially when you're first starting out. And then even as you progress as well, right? And coming to understand that you will not know everything, and that it is truly impossible to know everything. And that was something I struggled with in the early days of the career, right? You kind of get imposter syndrome, and you get concerned about what you don't know versus what you do know. And then you kind of get to a place where you realize it's okay to not know everything, and that you can engage with your team. You can reach out with the wonderful capabilities of modern technology today. You can reach out to basically anybody in the world. And if you've got something that you've got a problem you've never encountered, there's a high probability that somebody else has. And you can basically look to reach out. Everybody wants to help everybody, especially in tech. We're somewhat guarded with our solutions, but as time progresses, I'd like to believe that we can continue to stand on the shoulders of giants. That's really who I kind of lean towards. It's a saying I lean towards. That's really all I do. I stand on the shoulders of giants. There's a high probability somebody else has already solved that problem. I just need to tap into that, get an understanding of it, and then adapt and make it something that works for our clients, customers, etc.
So you've mentioned how you've relied on mentors that you've had throughout your career. You also look to other organizations or people who've paved the path. What are some other ways that you stay abreast of all the ongoing changes in technology?
Great question. So I'm what's referred to as a dirty lurker these days. I used to be extremely proactive on social media. I've kind of dialed that back over the course of the last little while. That's just for personal reasons. I use Reddit, I use LinkedIn, I use my contact sources. Like I mentioned previously, like the ability to just kind of reach out to somebody who's an expert in their area, in their field, it's at your fingertips, right? So I read a lot of white papers. I leverage a lot of the Microsoft resources that are available to us through our partnership. I leverage a lot of the Nintex resources that are available through that partnership as well, because these are fantastic people that have likely spent hundreds of hours researching a specific topic. And with the wonders of modern technology, as mentioned, I can watch a 30 to a 60-minute video and absorb hundreds of hours of knowledge, capability, a technical acumen in a fraction of the time. So those are some of the assets that I like to use. I read a lot of white papers. Big believer kind of in the Gartner principles as well. Those sort of things. I'm a pretty boring guy at night. I kind of just sit with my iPad and read a lot.
Yeah. And I get a sense too that it's a lot about working smarter, not harder, finding condensed, really, those soundbite ways of finding the information you need, so you can just take advantage of it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Google Foo as an example. I remember the days when Yahoo was the search engine of choice, as an example. I'm showing my age, but that's fine.
I remember it too. Don't worry.
yeah, and really being able to leverage terms and the capabilities that modern technology brings in order for you to find that nugget, that golden nugget, is really there for everybody now. That's one of the wonderful principles of these things, and it's really just about, okay, if you've encountered somebody who's an expert in a particular area, well, there's a high probability that they will continue to put out forward-thinking articles, technologies, those sort of things. So I consider my LinkedIn network to be a fantastic way to be able to facilitate that. And then you've got the broader spectrum of just kind of what's available on the internet. And like I mentioned, I'm a bit of a dirty lurker when it comes to the social media, but I will give a tremendous amount of credit to the open source communities that are out there. A fantastic lesson I learned a few years back was stop being a dirty lurker. You just solved a problem for somebody. It's your duty to give that back and to contribute it back. As an example, we were working on something. We leveraged some open source tech in order to be able to solve that problem. There was a couple bugs in that thing, and one of the co-devs at the time was just kind of like, hey, we fix these things, we have to give it back. And it's just kind of like, there was a small epiphany that occurred. You can't just harvest, you have to contribute. You also have to facilitate the tilling of the land, so to speak.
Yes, well, good digital citizenship lesson right there.
Exactly, yeah.
Great. So let's take it way back, Julian. What initially sparked your interest in technology? Is this something you were always into as a kid, or when did this start for you?
It started, people tease me. My mom used to tease. I came out of my mom with a mouse and a keyboard attached. It's just something I've just always been drawn to as a kid. Started pretty early doors. I still remember my very first computer, which was an Acorn Electron. In order to run games on an Acorn Electron, you actually had to type it in BASIC, and then you would compile that to cassette, and then you would press play on the cassette, and you could play these games. And I'm talking like 7 or 8 at that point. And then it was just kind of a progression of things, like my mom was always fantastic whenever I would ask for a certain piece of technology, so it was I was just always genuinely intrigued by how something worked, what this thing was. So technology's always been a passion. It's just something that's just been constant. No matter what I've been going through in my personal life, it's a way to, for one, connect with people, right? Like the whole idea of distributed networking and all those things. I've gone through that. I was on the BBSs way back in the day, IRC way back in the day. So to see this progression of tech is just something I've always kind of been involved in. I love it. Yeah. How I ended up here was just, everything happens for a reason. Every dark cloud has a silver lining, so to speak. So I wanted to be a footballer. I wanted to be a professional footballer. That was all I wanted to do. But there was a plan B, like some of my coaches said, hey, you are really good, but you should always have a plan B. And, played at a pretty high level, but life happens, and, that's okay. So fortunate enough for me, I was smart enough to have a bit of a plan B, and have been, on that, kind of on that road, that journey for over 20 years now. Something I learned early doors is, if you can do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So that's basically the philosophy that has, helped move me through various transitions in this career journey so far. I genuinely love what I do. As corny as it sounds, breaking it down to being able to help people is really what it comes down to. Is, hey, I've solved that problem before, maybe I can probably help you, or being in service of other organizations that are looking for help as well.
But let's switch gears. I'm curious to hear about your experience at Elantis and what really lights your fire to come into the office every day. And you mentioned passion for helping people. Is there anything else that has really contributed to your experience here?
So I've been what I'd say is a long-term proponent of our owner, our CEO, Dave. I've known Dave for a long time. We've kind of always been, I guess, philosophically aligned. We knew each other from a previous organization. And he's just, like I mentioned, we've just kind of aligned with our thoughts, what we think things are, should be. And we'd courted for a while, I would say, right? And then, the timing was just right. And for me, growing something is arguably one of the most wonderful experiences you can have, whatever that is, right? Whatever that growth is, whether that's growing an individual, growing the organization, seeing something come to bloom, and being a contributor to that is really something to be proud of, something I enjoy. They say the second time you do something, you should double what your results are. So I am very excited to repeat something, so to speak, in an even better way, if that makes any sense. And when I was presented with the opportunity to be able to do that, sat down with the wife, the family, and just said, hey, it could be a little demanding here in the next little while. Are you guys up for a challenge with me? And they were. Came in, and it's been a fantastic experience, kind of from day one, because I kind of knew where we were, and I knew where we wanted to get to, and seeing us achieve so much over the course of that time is kind of really solidified what I thought it would be. It never ends up quite being what you think it will be, right? But it's pretty close. It's been a fantastic journey thus far. The attraction was just, Nintex has been a big part of my life. We're an Nintex partner. One of the first, I call them the OG of UCD, so user-centric design principles. Knowing where and what that art of the possible was from an organizational standpoint for Elantis, but also the direction that tech is taking, and being able to just kind of be like, hey, we are going to position ourselves in a way that we can take advantage of where that market's going to get to. And positioning yourself to be able to help people, and just even if you're only one or two steps ahead of what somebody or what an individual or what an organization is looking to achieve, you have to turn around and basically shine the light. You got to turn around, shine the light, and say, hey, I'm walking up the stairs and I'm only one step or two steps ahead of you, but I'm holding the lantern. I can see where we're going. I'm going to turn around and make sure you can see where we're going as well. And that shared philosophy was kind of what attracted me. Our core principles as well. Right, those sort of things. To do the right thing, doing the right thing is typically the hardest thing, or sometimes it's the hardest thing, but that doesn't stop it from being the right thing, is something myself and Dave have spoken about previously. And it's just kind of stayed true to that and staying true to that. Yeah, so I think early doors coming into Elantis, and just having what I'll call the wiggle room and the trust to fail, and knowing that I'll pick myself back up and fail again, and pick myself back up and fail again until we really succeed. And having the trust from the leadership team to be able to do those sort of things, especially when you're first starting out again and everything is new, was really refreshing.
And I think that's great advice for anyone who's just starting out too, right? Is to always be able to brush yourself off and just get back in the game. So
that's yeah. So it's actually so true, especially in tech, right? It's you're gonna get knocked over. There are going to be individuals that know things that you don't. There are going to be times where you make a recommendation and you go, hey, wait a sec. I've now learned some new things. Maybe I've got to go back and revisit it, and that's okay. Like the people part of our principles, and PPT, so people, process, technology, and people forget it's really about people at the end of the day. That's it. Being able to function as a trusted advisor, whether that's for coworkers, peers, leaders, other organizations, that's established by being a human being. That's established by saying, hey, you know what? Not perfect, but striving to be. To use another classic corny line, there's a reason that in the Persian rugs they actually intentionally put a mistake in every rug they make. And yes, that is to allow. There's only one entity, being whatever it is, that is truly perfect, and everybody else is basically a reflection of that perfection, but are imperfect. And in order to allow negative energy to escape, there has to be an imperfection. But reminding people that we're all human beings, we're all people. It's the most important principle, right? Irrespective of all the other things.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on, some sound wisdom from you, Julian. So thank you so much for your time today and sharing your experiences, your insights along your career journey, and sharing what's next for you. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.